And there you go. Please do mute if you are not talking. It looks like everybody is anyway, which is great. It's up to you whether you have your video on or not. So the agenda will start with a bit of framing from our programme lead, Tom Andrews, about what a SFP Gold Award means. And then we'll be hearing from Brighton for 10 to 15 minutes, and then Bristol for the same amount of time. And then I'll share the Q&A that follows. Please do use the chat function to communicate with each other or ask questions. Chris, my colleague, Chris Walker, will be keeping an eye on that, and any particular questions that are suitable for the Q&A at the end. If you want to put them in the chat, you can do that beforehand in case you might forget what you were going to ask, so he can bring them up and keep an eye on those. But also in the Q&A, use your real or your virtual hand to put up. I might ask the colleagues to look out for those as well, because there's quite a lot of people on screen here. I'm not sure if I'll see everybody's hand. So great to see you all. I'm going to hand over to Tom to do a bit of framing. Tom?
Hello, everyone. I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. Leon did say I was going to frame what an SFP Gold Award means. I'm hoping that that will speak for itself when we hear from our contributors today. But I suppose one reflection is that we are connected in, and I've been connected in quite a lot to what's happening sort of across Europe and internationally around place-based food system change. And I can absolutely guarantee you that what's been done in Bristol and Brighton is up there with the best of what's happening internationally around this. So I think we should all feel very proud as a movement about what's been done here. Just a little bit of background. As you all know, Bristol and Brighton have been on this journey around sustainable food for, I was going to say a decade, but I think in Brighton's case, it's probably more like 2, looking at Emily here. Not in any way about your age, Emily, I just mean you've been on a long journey here. You two really, these two places have been the pioneers around this area of work, as you're all probably aware. And in many ways, of course, you've been the inspiration for what sustainable food cities and now places has become. And I think it's worth reflecting on that. We've literally just had the latest membership panel for sustainable food places. And I've got a feeling that we're getting pretty close to, if not over, 70 member food partnerships across the UK around this agenda. So where you have led, many are following. Across that group, there are now a large number of places that are actively working towards their silver award. There are a number already on silver, and there are 3 who are actively now working towards gold. So again, I think what's really interesting in this is that part of the rationale for the SFP programme was we didn't want people to have to reinvent the wheel. So again, places getting to gold, hopefully other people can follow you faster and faster on this journey. Obviously, we're all probably aware of what I think is the most extraordinary thing in recent months is that recognition in the National Food Strategy about the idea of the need for a food strategy in every local authority in the UK. What we're obviously arguing for is you can't have a good food strategy or deliver it without a food partnership. But there is, with a fair wind, a chance that the idea of a food partnership and a food strategy may become normalised if it gets included in the white paper, certainly for England. And actually, as usual, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales feel like they're ahead of the game in a lot of this as well. So I just think the whole momentum of the movement is extraordinary. We've all obviously been incredibly focused on COVID response for the last 2 years. But actually, I think if more than anything else, COVID has shown how important this joined up approach to food system change is locally. And that's part of the reason why it was recognised in the National Food Strategy. So loads to celebrate, a huge amount that you can learn from these guys. I think we're only going to scratch the surface in the time available, and we will be asking you if there's more we can do to help share the learning around this. But I want to take this point, another opportunity to celebrate amazing achievements in Bristol and Brighton and across the network. So as well as thinking about this is what can we learn from what you have done, I think we just got to keep reminding ourselves how much you have done and celebrate your achievements as we go. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to hand over to Emily. Really looking forward to this session. I hope you all are as well. And yeah, let's see how things go over the next hour. But we can always do more if we need to really unearth what's going on in these places.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Leon. I'm just trying to share my slides. I just need to... Tom, could you give me a nod? Does that look like a full screen, proper slide? Brilliant. Thank you. So lovely to be here, and so lovely to be here with Bristol as well. The absolutely amazing stuff that they've done, and really looking forward to hearing about. We've very much done this collaboratively between the places, working out what gold needs to look like. And so really nice to be doing it with both today. So I've got a kind of maximum of 15 minutes, and I know someone's going to give me a kick if it's when I get to 13. So I want to try not to say too much. And then we've got time for questions at the end. But basically, I was going to cover a little bit about the process of doing gold and what was useful and what wasn't, how it was helpful as a city, because I know quite a lot of the people coming today are interested in their own awards at whatever level. I mean, gold's just the same as any of them, really. They're all a bit of a nightmare once you get there, to be honest. So, you know, so some of the pitfalls and the good stuff about them, what we learned from doing it, and then also talk a little bit about what we actually did. But I'm only going to skim on that because I think it'd probably be better to take questions on that. It's a bit so that's the plan. I hope that's what everyone was expecting. I should have said I'm Emily. I'm the Policy and Partnerships Manager at Brighton Hove Food Partnership. We're a non-profit independent food partnership, like many of yourselves. We were founded in 2003, so we were one of the first food partnerships, if not probably the first in the country. And our first food strategy and action plan was released in 2006, which is even before my time. And I'm quite, you know, quite elderly in this, as Tom has just kindly reminded me. Thank you for that, Tom. So we obviously got our award in November 2020, which was slightly delayed. We had hoped to be getting that in April 2020, but COVID came along and we had to all postpone a bit while we all ran around doing mad COVID things. So the story of sort of how we got to our gold award, I've as I've pointed out in the slide, all good stories begin with a party, and I've added in a social media campaign. And I think that those two things are really important. So there is a video of our launch event, which was a really good party. So at the beginning of the process, we needed to pitch to Gold Sustainable Food Places, pitch to the board and say what we were going to do that would make us gold, which is different than doing the earlier, you know, the bronze and silver ones where you say what you've done. So it was looking ahead in 2 years in this case, it was meant to be 18 months. So we had a pitch to them. They said, right, yep, go for it. And we had a bit of a party to then launch what we needed to make happen in 18 months. And there is a video of that, which I'm not even going to attempt to show, not least because of time, but it was really good fun. There's another picture from it there. This is one of the pages from our gold bid. And I'm not going to, as I said, I'm not going to go into the detail today, but there's quite a lot of stuff in this, which is online, and I'll put a link to it in the presentation at the end, which I believe is going to be shared after the session, or you can just look on our website and look for gold. So we had a bit of a party at the beginning to launch it. That was a good chance to get people on board. That's the then leader of the council. I think we've been through two since then, standing there holding our little homemade banner. And it was launched in our community kitchen. You can see a few tweets at the bottom as well. We had a hashtag, which was a really great way to try and get people involved in a fairly low cost way. It was like, can you do something and tweet about it, please? And lots of people did that. And there's some more examples of that in our gold bid. That's the front cover if you've got a rare paper version, but obviously it's just at the beginning if you're looking at it online, or you can actually just look at the hashtag, which was Gold Food City Bid. Because we started when it was still Sustainable Food Cities, not Places, just to say we didn't get it wrong. So the whole journey, it began really with getting the silver. Obviously, the whole idea of the awards is you build on it. We did really a lot of consultation about this, but we tied it into our consultation for our next food strategy action plan. And that was really helpful, we found, because actually what you want to do is, whether you're doing an action plan or an award, what you really want to do is get people engaged and involved and get stuff happening. So to make our action plan better, we didn't really say, would you like to have something in an action plan? We've much more branded it as, can you help us get to gold? Which was an awful lot easier to sell, really. We really used it as a kind of tool, you know, what will it feel like when you're in a gold sustainable food place? What needs to happen? So we use that as a sort of visioning thing when we did consultation on that. I won't go through all the details of it, but there's various governance-y bits there. We did some toolkits, which I've actually got a slide on later. And I'm aware you probably can't see the detail on this, but then again, it's just come out of our gold bit. So if you wanted to look at this roadmap, it's in there. I think the main one of the really important things for us was the one in the bottom left, which is that there was then, because we had this thing we could sell, it then became a commitment in the Brighton and Hove City Council corporate plan, which is a really good way to embed action within a council. So, you know, it's quite a short corporate plan, but they explicitly supported that. We will support the bid for Brighton and Hove to become a gold sustainable food city, and that's really fantastic then when you're meeting with council officers or just generally looking for traction, that is in the corporate plan. Sounds really dull, but it's really important. And then of course finally we presented to the Sustainable Food Places Board in November 2020, so that was the culmination of putting together this bid, having pitched 2 years earlier, and then having done the actions or variations on the actions that we said we would do in that pitch when we got to the end of the process. We did do some toolkits, so it was really important to us that this gold bid was for the whole city. Historically, we've always been better at engaging, I think, with our organisations, whether that's community groups or, you know, the kind of statutory groups, the bigwigs. But we also had toolkits for individuals here and things that people could do to take as pledges, things for schools, businesses, and those are all on our website. So those are links to the toolkits, but I've also got a link at the end with where that we did kind of store that journey, because we thought it'd be useful for other people in future if people wanted to adapt them. And just an example of the type of thing in our toolkit, this is just from one of them. So the first bit from one of them, it was around individuals. There was stuff in there about healthy diets that people can do, particularly our kind of Veg City stuff that was really important, and stuff around reducing food waste, which you know, just has some sort of handy tips about things you might want to do. And we had quite a lot of people engaging over that. It's not something we tracked. I think you could be more systematic about how you track that. I know Bristol did some good stuff, much more engaged with individuals, but ours was more of a general get it out there, raise awareness, and people pledged. And these were some of the pledges that people could take. So obviously you're not going to read these, but again, they're all on our website. And we kind of did an easy top 10 as well that we also made as a big poster that we trawled around. And so that was top 10 for residents and visitors. We're a tourist economy, so it's not just the people who live there. Top 10 actions for schools and top 10 actions for food businesses. And then we also had to, for our gold bid, had to kind of we had to show that we'd built on our silver bid. So it was a kind of continuation and extension of what we'd done on all areas of the food system, which I have to say is a bit challenging. That took a while. Thanks for that, Tom. But we also had to demonstrate 2 areas of excellence. And one of them we chose was food poverty. But that was very much building on groundwork that had gone before. So we'd already done a citywide food poverty action plan, which had been a really good way of galvanising people in the city. And we'd already developed a kind of approach where we'd committed to looking for upstream solutions around food poverty. So we found when we were kind of pitching it, we couldn't really say this is what we're going to do from scratch. It was very much building on what went before. And I'm sort of flagging that because I think it's really useful for people who are thinking about awards, you know, going up an award, to think of that. Actually, it's all right to bring in what happened already. You can't pretend that you're starting from scratch if you're not. The things that we put in that we actually have put the detail in our bid, and as I say, we've got loads of kind of pictures and stuff for this and explanations in the bids, so do have a look at it if you're interested in these areas, or we can take the questions at the end. So our child poverty focus continues. We had a really successful Healthy Start campaign. We'd had one before, but we did a better one this time, I think. There was a really important emphasis on holiday lunch clubs. We have a local brand, Chomp, community run. They're fantastic, and they've gone from leaps and bounds. Obviously with COVID that then shifted and went even further, but that's another story. Surplus Food Network as well. That's the way that we bring together organisations who are intercepting surplus food and redistributing it. In a way, I didn't want to put that in the food poverty bit, because actually waste food shouldn't be the solution to food poverty, but actually realistically, those organisations do a fantastic job of supporting the lunch clubs and the food banks and affordable food projects in the city. We had a project around older people working, that was a sort of small part in a bigger consortium about taking a preventative approach to undernutrition. So enabling people, especially frontline workers, to understand what the sort of signs and symptoms might be if someone's struggling, and to signpost them to things like shared meals, lunch clubs, or other support, you know, which has actually increased under COVID, what's there in terms of home delivery and stuff. And that was really important to us because it was a very high level. We have a really significant proportion of older people living alone in our city. I think it's the highest in the country, or certainly close to it. We also, and you know, often it's obviously there's malnutrition or undernutrition for medical reasons, but there's also quite a lot of people who are experiencing that because they've maybe been bereaved or lonely, those sorts of reasons that are social reasons. So that was really good. And that also has then, as was part of that, it's been built into the mainstream commissioning for older people as well now. Food is very much part of that. There's a food worker as part of that consortium. Also our continued focus on shared meals, city that cooks and eats together. And of course, we slightly overachieved in our food poverty pitch because of course COVID-19 struck just as we were kind of getting going really. And lots of those things above, but also lots of other stuff happened. And we have some detail on that in our, you know, on our website as well, all about the COVID-19 stuff. I'm a bit worried about time. I don't know if anyone, Chris, I can see. Could you tell me how many more minutes I've got left? I think I'm banging on a bit. I need to speed up.
You've got 4 or 5. Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, good. Fantastic. I'm not about to get kicked off. Okay. So the other area of excellence that we picked again, so this was at the beginning of the kind of 2-year process, or 18 months as it was meant to be, was around veg cities, which was where we've worked really closely with the Food Foundation, added value to their national campaign, used their resources, and also done loads of stuff locally. And again, it was building on what was there or before. So this was sort of where we set out, and we set out in a nice sort of infographic what we wanted to achieve. And then we set out some things we wanted to do. The things that we specifically did for the Gold Award, and again, this slightly shifted due to COVID happening in the middle. So there was lots of stuff that wasn't in there, you know, to do with the importance of actually getting fresh veg into food banks during the pandemic. It was really, really challenging, wasn't it? And we did do sort of central ordering and stuff, but that's all written up separately as part of our COVID response. But the specific actions we reported back on, we did a Veg City Challenge, which was brilliant. It was so fun. We had the city chefs from some of the top city restaurants, and we have some quite interesting and fancy restaurants in Brighton, developing a new school meal for schools with veg in it. So it was a kind of plant-based meal, and that was fantastic. A burrito was the winning option, which was then rolled out in schools as it had to be a kind of grab and go. There's loads of stuff about that again on our website. We'd also done some school food waste audits. So it was around, there's a lot of school food wasted. We'd found that actually a lot of what's wasted, unfortunately, is veg. The school meals can't serve less veg because A, no one would want them to, and B, they're not allowed to. There's all sorts of standards. But what they did was they did this trial that worked really well around having power pots, which is like, so it's like a salad bar approach. I have to say I haven't got up-to-date info where we are with that, because I know with COVID, some of these things got a bit tricky, but it was about having lots of raw veg on offer, which was really successful. We also did some sort of more kind of training type things. So there was training on incorporating veg for people, all sorts of frontline workers, especially, including, for instance, people who work with homeless and vulnerably housed people. There was also things like some university research, where we looked at visibility of veg in neighbourhoods, and some really important, obviously, you know, the community partners are really key to this. So Molescombe Forest Garden, for instance, did some fantastic stuff around, you know, cook and pick around veg. And another really key part of this kind of Veg City thing was the Planning and Food project, which was about redrafting an existing planning advice note, which gives technical guidance to developers on how to incorporate food growing into new development. Sounds really dull, but it is about making more community food growing spaces and mainstreaming it in the planning system. And there were some other bits with that as well. I won't talk about it here because there are sort of webinars. Oh, I can hear my dog's about to bark, sorry.
2 minutes.
Okay. The other thing it did is it gave us a chance to tell the story of our place. I won't talk about this in detail, but again, it was, and that wasn't me barking, that was my dog. But it gave us a chance, I think, to raise the profile about our city as well as what's going on in it. So we've used these sorts of bits that we pulled together to tell that story in lots of other places. And it also gave us a chance, I think, to pitch looking forward. So obviously we're really focused on food and climate change at the minute, and it gave us a chance to sort of articulate that to the people we were engaging with. I'm going to skip through some of the other stuff we're doing looking forward. My kind of takeaways are really to, as I said, to use the Gold Award to give welly to what you want to do anyway. what you've already done does count. You can't separate them, I found. Think about what comes after the award. So it's not just social media and press releases, but, you know, actually we ended up doing some stickers, but with hindsight, I wish we'd had all that planned before. These are stickers that people could put up saying we supported the gold bid. We thought actually it would have been nice to send it was a bit tricky because of COVID, but we'd have sent the award around on a bus tour maybe to, you know, like when you bring the football gold home. But we weren't able to organise that in COVID, and because I think we hadn't put enough thought into what came afterwards. It's a bit like having a baby, isn't it? All the effort was going into the birth, and then it was like, oh my God, I've got a baby. What do I do with it? So, and maybe that's just my experience of of having a child, but it was a bit like that. I think the other lesson that we really learned is people really like awards, especially councillors. They really like the fact that they were gold. It was a really good mechanism for pushing what we did, for buying support. And also you will see it used then, hopefully, some of it because you've asked and some of it because people have just done it anyway. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let this dog out. This is ridiculous. You will see it around. So I've just, you probably can't read the detail of it, but that's a screenshot from the new good food standards that were introduced by Brighton Hove City Council, procurement standards that are really important that we work with them on. And obviously they cite the fact it's a gold sustainable food city to justify that happening. So it becomes a justification for more good stuff happening. Always remember to have a party. And then I've just included some links to some of the resources I mentioned just at the end, because I know Chris said he'd circulate these. And I think that's it. I hope I was on time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Emily. Fantastic, amazing. Keeping to time. I mean, it is evident that there is so much more learning, and there will be from Bristol as well, around this. So we, the team, the SFP team, are going to think about ways that we can give you a chance to dig deeper into some of these areas. Let us know directly, either in the chat or by email, about what areas you want to dig into. But I will say, please do go to our website and read the full applications. It's a really good start to finding out how these places got gold, but also the journey is really important and the process. Okay, great. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah, Danny, Joy and Jane now, who are going to talk about Bristol's Gold Award.
I'm going to start, Leon. Hi, everybody. I'm not sure, is my screen visible, or is it just, do we only see Leon speaking at the moment? Probably only Leon.
No, I can see the...
You can see the actual slide. Okay.
Yes.
So in our preparation, we decided to divide our presentation into 3 different sections, and there's a group of us who are going to share this between us. So, and we've been trying to distill some of the lessons. So if you can just keep on that first slide for the moment, Leon, that would be great. No, just go back one, just a second. So we're going to look at how we've gone about building a strategic partnership. One of our areas of excellence, which was growing a good food movement. And then Hannah's going to focus on local authority particularly. Just as a very quick intro, we had 6 themes or 6 action areas for our gold bid, and 2 of those were our areas of excellence. Initially, food waste and what we called buying better, which was a lot to do with procurement. Because of COVID, we had to change that, and we moved to work, as Emily said, work that actually we've been doing anyway. So that became a new area of excellence, which Danny's going to talk about. So the Growing for Gold movement. So that's just the, Growing the Good Food movement. So that's just the overall picture of what we did. So trying to distill some of the lessons. We decided that this clear purpose, clear communication was really essential when we were reflecting about, well, what themes we want to share with other cities. And right at the heart of that, a small group of determined people who really wanted to make a gold award happen. So some things to pick out. We had a lot of meetings before putting in our proposal to go for gold to sustainable food places. A lot of meetings with public health, with the sustainability team at the council, with lots of other organisations working on food. A lot of input from Tom, helping us to work out how to go forward on this. We met with Emily and Vic at Brighton and talked between the cities on what a gold award might mean for us, and actually had a say in some of the criteria. We then put together a proposal. So we had to capture this concept of what Bristol going for a gold award actually meant, and to capture that in writing in a way that reflected other stakeholders' areas of expertise. So we started to talk about an ambition of a good meal every day for everyone, that sort of ambition for 2020 as a sort of a heading, and then lots of detail under that. The gold criteria was really helpful for shaping that communication concept note really for other stakeholders. And it, over time, our 6 themes evolved with our areas of excellence eventually decided. One of the things we did was to write it in terms of asks and offers. So Bristol Food Network are a very small community interest company in Bristol, and our purpose has been to nurture collaboration across the food movement over the last 10 years. So we generously offered to coordinate this approach, and we did put it that way. We said we're offering to do certain things and we're asking for other things. So one of our asks was to have a coordinator opposite within the council, so the ability to work with a city council officer who had a clear line of reporting to cabinet and senior management level, just so we could keep things moving. And then we had a round table. So Emily mentioned a party. We had a round table, a bit more formal, in April 2018, having done all this background work to now get agreement to officially move forward. So that included the City Council supporting us with some initial funding that matched our grant, our award from the Sustainable Food Places. I think last thing to say in this bit before I hand over to Jane is that an award works for some people, most definitely, as Emily said. So council, great, but not everyone is so interested in an award. So we had to kind of keep framing this in other ways, and it was quite challenging. But one way was talking about piloting a collaborative approach, a collaborative partnership, and using the award criteria as a very helpful framework to work together. I'm just going to hand over to Jane, and then we'll spot back again. So next slide, Leon.
Okay, am I going to pop up on the screen?
You're on the screen, Jane.
I am on the screen. Okay, I can still see you. Okay. Okay, so like many cities, Bristol does not have one overarching food organisation. No one is in charge, but many of us are working with overlapping and shared purpose. Bristol Food Network have spent over a decade trying to build cooperation and collaboration and to show what we hold in common. Our Silver Award submission highlighted the work of over 120 organisations and projects. It was a big bottom-up collective effort rather than the result of an imposed top-down strategy. And we wanted to take that approach further for Gold, allowing as many individuals, organisations and businesses to show how collectively we're all working towards the same goals. We didn't worry about having everything perfectly in place at the outset. We tentatively started the road to Gold at a conference to celebrate the awarding of silver in spring 2016 without having any idea of how gold might be possible. But when we came to embark on the campaign in earnest, we did recruit some key partners with reach, networking and connections that would enable us to communicate beyond the usual suspects and outside the food world. That was the starting point for going for Gold, working with how the city is rather than how we might like it to be. Next slide, please, and back to Joy.
Thanks. So the third area we wanted to pull out was this building on and connecting in with past achievements. So Emily already mentioned that, but also looking at new plans and structures within the city. So I wanted to give you some examples of how we've done that. And it is all about trying to integrate work on food with other ongoing daily events in the city, other strategic plans. In our silver award, we had quite an area of, a gap, an area of weakness, which was a collaborative approach to addressing food poverty. So we had not done the type of work that Emily talked about in Brighton. But in the intervening period, and as we were starting to move into work, by 2018, Feeding Britain now had a Feeding Bristol initiative, and that was starting to bring other players together to address food poverty. And so food equality became a very important strand of our work. And again, as Emily said, that really kicked off during COVID. So we worked with a new group and brought them in and made sure that their interests were really reflected. Bristol also has something called a One City Plan. So it's an initiative of our mayor, and it brings together many different strategies kind of under one umbrella. And there's a One City Partnership, there are One City boards, there's a city office. So it's an unusual system, but for us, really essential that we worked with them and engaged with them in what we were trying to do with food, and made sure that that was then championed by, we have an environment board, which is very focused on climate change. We have a health and wellbeing board, which obviously champions the food equality angle. And we needed both of those to really understand what we were doing. We had been working with the Food Policy Council, and we decided to just put that on the back burner for the moment, because many of those people we also needed in effectively a steering group for our Gold initiative. So we had to move some of our structures around a little bit. We were very fortunate to get our deputy mayor, one of our deputy mayors, in as chair of our Going for Gold steering group. We also have in Bristol a Green Capital Partnership organisation, which brings together many different businesses and people really engaged in the environment. So it's a way that we can link food in with other themes like transport, nature, etc. And we also shared a reminder of the history of our work since 2009, really, just as part of our talking with people and building that interest. So back to Jane. And next slide.
Okay. Bristol Food Network has no office and no permanent staff. We had no paid coordinator until 2017, and even then it was a part-time short-term post. However, we do have a history of building collaboration, achieved with great care to acknowledge the contribution of others. We decided at a small group meeting in a cafe that gold was something that we wanted to see for the city, and then set about looking for allies and to convince others that it was something that they wanted to do too. Building on our existing network connections and past collaborations, we were lucky in recruiting initial partners of Bristol Green Capital Partnership and Resource Futures. The Green Capital Partnership gave us access to over 1,000 members who are mostly non-food organisations, and Resource Futures brought nationally known expertise in waste and recycling. Bristol City Council brought officer support and all its own connections, not least through the One City Gathering, which adopted gold as a shared priority across participating organisations. From that first set of partners, we expanded to recruit other, preferably umbrella organisations who could represent all of the sustainable food places themes on the Going for Gold steering group. We started with no funding in place, but gradually found incremental backing from Sustainable Food Places, Bristol City Council, and from an independent local funder, the RH Southern Trust. We used some of our funding to help prime the start of a sponsorship programme, which eventually brought in money from 3 local companies, which helped support the Bristol Green Capital Partnership to fully participate in Going for Gold. Next slide, please, and I'm handing over.
That's my cue. Hey, I'm Danny, and I was the comms coordinator for the gold bid in Bristol. I've got quite a lot to get through in my 5 minutes, so I'm sorry if I rush through a bit. So yeah, I just want to answer the question, how did Bristol Going for Gold use communications to bring people together to build momentum in the good food movement, which, as Joy mentioned, was one of our areas of excellence in the end, the one that replaced procurement. So at the beginning of the public facing campaign, the remit for the comms for Going for Gold, Bristol Going for Gold, was to reach everyone. And if you're talking about Bristol, that's a lot of people. That's not far off 500,000. And that's not even including everyone who comes into the city just for work every day. So if we could move to slide 2. Thank you. So we realised early on that approaching food in a whole system way would have an impact on the way that we approach our comms as well. So food means different things for different, not only for different people, but it also means different things depending on what those people are doing. For example, talking about food waste in the home requires completely different language, messages, solutions, and so on than talking about food waste to people who are at work. So for our purposes, we decided to split our audiences into individuals, non-food organisations and food businesses. And as you can see on the slide, that was reflected on our website, which has a designated section for each audience. Of course, you can continue to subdivide your audience again and again. And there were times when we had to tailor our comms to, say, schools or councillors or certain communities. But broadly speaking, these 3 groups gave us a really good basis for making our campaigns relevant throughout the period that we were campaigning. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another useful way to approach the split of the audiences, and this is especially relevant when you're running an under-resourced campaign, as we definitely were, was to work with partners who specialise in reaching certain audiences. So for instance, Bristol Green Capital Partnership was the coordinating partner that led communications to non-food organisations. Next slide, please.
2 minutes, Danny.
Thank you. Many websites are just a place where people can go to understand what an organisation or a campaign is, a sort of placeholder, but Bristol Going for Gold website really sought to be more of a focal point for bringing the good food movement together and encouraging people to take action. This was especially important during COVID, though of course we've known that in advance. What's more, our website was a virtual and interactive representation of Bristol's Good Food Plan. It essentially gave us the means to capture many of the elements of the plan and give people a way to contribute to its delivery in the city. I was just going to run through a few of the main features of the website that really made that possible. So registering users and logging of actions was a good way of capturing activity and giving people a more tangible way of contributing. I've mentioned that we split the audiences, which meant that people were immediately able to find the information relevant to them. And also, if we could go on to the next slide, our blog section was and still is a really living, breathing representation of a huge section of the good food movement in the city, and gives it a single place to exist, even though it comes from disparate sources. And final slide, please. So finally, I just wanted to pick up on our use of film, because that touches also on some of the work we did in reaching diverse communities. Using film was a really great way to capture the messages and the calls to action and translate them into something very relatable and something very Bristolian. The format's a really accessible way to, for most people in terms of capturing their attention. And if it's done well, which I think ours were, they add a lot of weight to the messages, especially if you can get high profile screening locations, which we managed to on a few occasions with the help of Bristol City Council. I'll post the link where you can see the majority, where you can see all the films that we did, the main major themes of the Gold City bid, as well as our Gold Win film. And finally, I just wanted to say that the films were also used as a tool by our community participation lead, Anira, who created 5 short films, each one from a different member of a different community in Bristol, talking about their own sustainable food practices. And each one subtitled into their mother tongue, and they were intended to be used as a starting point to inspire further conversation on food and in their communities. And just to say that last week, Joy and I had the opportunity to meet one of Bristol's new Black and Green ambassadors who will be working to promote environmental activism in diverse communities. And she pointed out that you're more likely to take action if you can see people who look like you taking action too. And films are a really good way to put that idea into practice. So Anira's films are at the bottom of the film page, and I'll post the link in the chat now. Thanks very much. Sorry, that was a bit rushed. And I'll pass on to Hannah. The next slide, I think.
Thanks, Annie. So hi everyone, I'm Hannah. I'm a project manager in the Sustainable City and Climate Change Service in Bristol City Council, working on food projects. So as one of the coordinating organisations for Bristol's Going for Gold bid, I'm just going to share a few ways that we strengthened the momentum around Going for Gold within the council. So within the Bristol City Council, the healthy and sustainable foods programme shared between the Sustainable City team and also public health. But as everyone's really touched on, there's been a long-standing relationship between Bristol Food Network and Bristol City Council working on this agenda. So Emily has touched on this and Joy as well, but it sounds quite simple, but having the award to aim for has been really beneficial. Something really tangible to get the city behind. It's been a great marketing and comms hook as well. Next slide, please, Chris. Thank you. So yeah, we've been really fortunate in Bristol that our Deputy Mayor, Asher Craig, has been really engaged and enthusiastic. She's really passionate about sustainable food and has a real appreciation for Bristol's food partnership work to date. But one thing that's really helped nurture this enthusiasm at city leader level was becoming a signatory to the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. So I'd say if you can identify opportunities for city leaders where they can get together for peer-to-peer exchange, and that kind of inspiration can flow. Yeah, so also to just kind of showing leaders where you can, rather than telling them, arranging visits to some of your inspiring local projects can really help bring what you mean by sustainable food, bring that to life. So one really effective internal communications tool that I want to share in a bit of detail is an organisational mapping exercise that we undertook. So it does sound a bit dull, but bear with me. So we looked at the whole council as an organisation and identified every team whose role has a link to sustainable food, and then plotted this in the same layout as the organisational structure chart. So next slide, please, Chris. So yeah, don't worry, you're not meant to be able to see the detail of this, but just want to give an overview of the exercise. So we've got 3 directorates in the council. So I did a different, just using Excel, different worksheet for each directorate, and then broke that down. So across the top, you've got the directors, and then in the column to the right of that, you've got all the heads of services, and then to the right of that again, the coloured boxes are the teams that sit within those services that have got a link to food. So the colours, that just relates to the theme from our Going for Gold bid, the most relevant theme. And I just added a bit more detail. So this is quite an interactive document that if you hover over one of the cells, there's just a bit more information about the team members involved, the other services that they're kind of linked to, and also just a bit more information about their role. So it was a really useful visual aid to show senior leadership how cross-cutting food was in the organisation, and where responsibility sat, and also where impact could be made. So yeah, really useful piece of work, but it's quite challenging to keep on top of in an organisation as large as the council. Yeah, next slide, please.
Just a minute, Hannah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next slide, please. Slide. So having this done that piece of work, it meant that when the time came for service leads to write their annual service plans, we'd identified all the services where there was a relevance to food. So we could approach heads of service and ask them to include Going for Gold in their service plan for the coming year. To support this request, which made it easier by suggesting some key delivery actions that services could take that would contribute to Going for Gold. The mapping also helped us identify which colleagues to target in promotional comms. We tried to have a presence at every opportunity that presented itself internally. So we held lunchtime learning sessions for colleagues. Hosted table discussions at large divisional level meetings, had Going for Gold topics, the Mayor's Hot Coffee, Hot Topic, had information stores at events that were happening. We also held regular briefings with senior leadership, just made sure that people were really familiarised with the project at all levels of the organisation, right up to the chief executive level. So this resulted in the chief exec actually becoming a champion for Going for Gold. So doing this really helps kind of protect against staff changes and turnover, and has kept the momentum going, which is really helpful in like what was a 2-year kind of project where people tend to come and go. So just to finish up, we've also made sure that food is incorporated in city strategies as much as possible. So as Joy said, the One City plan, it's also integrated into our climate and ecological emergency programme of work. So yeah, to ensure really that the legacy work of Going for Gold can continue. So yes, I think so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Really inspiring. And again, there's so much more that we could hear from in this short space. But I don't know, for me, one thing is clear, is that the learning from Bristol and Brighton is applicable to all food partnerships, you know, particularly, you know, whether you're going for an award or not, you know, the idea of taking the whole place, grassroots, strategic, the whole place with you by whichever method is appropriate, I think is, you know, everyone can learn from that. Right, we're going to go to questions. Chris, is there anything specific in the chat that you want me to take to our colleagues? If not, if you want to put up your real or virtual hands, anyone.
I'll just check the chat a bit more. Do you want to start off with some questions from?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Have we got? There's probably so many. It's hard to know what to ask because it's also fantastic, isn't it?
Do you want me to answer the Caterlink question just while we're waiting? Because there was a question in the chat about our school meal service, which like a lot of areas, we have a school meal service where one bit of it is run under a contract. So all the primary school meals are delivered by a provider, which at the time was Caterlink. And then there's also the secondary schools have their own independent ones. So most of the work we've done around school meals has been at that kind of with the school meals manager. When I say we've done, obviously it's the city council have done, but we've supported the city council. And just to say, Caterlink were brilliant as a contractor. Unfortunately, the contractor then changed. I won't say any names, but the subsequent one was a bit less helpful, I have to say. And obviously COVID has made it quite tricky as well with all that kind of procurement work. But actually, I think school meals is a really key area for a lot of places. And I think having a sympathetic school meals manager, she's someone we've put a lot of effort into supporting and maintaining good relationships with, and she's absolutely brilliant. And that's been really helpful in terms of a lot of the ambitions. I hope that answers the question.
Great. Thanks, Amy. I'm going to go Kerry and then Joe from Middlesbrough and then you, Tom. So Kerry.
Hi, yeah, just a quick one. I just put it in the chat. I was just wondering what's after gold and how do you plan to keep up the momentum once you've reached the goal? How do you keep that up?
A good one for Bristol, because I think you've been talking about this.
Yeah, good question. I think it was in 2019 we started talking about Bristol Good Food 2030. So we've managed to get at least the words into documents and into people's heads, if not the actual what does it mean yet. So, but we were very clear that gold is kind of our starting point. It's a launch pad. We've effectively piloted a way of working together for the last 2 years. But the next challenge is now to really build that with more stakeholders and really bringing together both the social and the climate change much more strongly, and finding a way to incorporate the economic angle even stronger. So as you probably would have gathered, Bristol doesn't have, unlike Brighton and Hove, you know, one big organisation who's seen as doing everything. We are very much a jigsaw puzzle with a few organisations providing a lot of drive and leadership, but it is quite a big collaborative effort. So that's our next challenge, and we're just about to get going on that.
Can I answer from a Brighton perspective as well? I mean, I suppose just to say we're not a big organisation. In fact, we have a very tiny amount of people doing on this. And it is very much, when I say we, I am speaking for the city, and in particular, I think historically we have it's the smaller groups, those people who we are particularly good at kind of amplifying what they do. We have some amazing community activity that I think would otherwise go a little bit under the radar. And one of the things we do is to make that more visible, and that's very much the focus of the gold bid. So in terms of where the food partnership, we have such limited resource, like everyone, to kind of make stuff happen ourselves. So we'll have the odd specific bit of project work that is ours. But in terms of where we're pointing that, one of those is to engage with a city council initiative. So they're looking at taking a circular economy approach to food, and obviously that's quite important to try and make sure that the partners who need to be part of that, the people are part of that who need to be, and that kind of, you know, community and grassroots stuff, it features in that. We ourselves are looking at really taking our approach, you know, the partnership approach that we've talked about and Bristol have talked about, and which is so important in food, to a much more landscape scale project. So it's about supporting the city council, who own a load of farmland estate, to do something really different with how they do that, including around food supply chains and that sort of thing. So that's a bit of project work that we're doing. And then in terms of our whole city stuff, that bit about capturing what's happening on the ground and amplifying it, and making and helping it to prosper because people in high places are then more aware of it. Our real focus is the food and climate change agenda. You know, we can see it's actually becoming really key that food isn't left out of climate action. And even in our city council, we're really proud of becoming a gold sustainable food city. I keep seeing stuff about food and climate, which is really focused on energy and transport, but without including the food. So we've got all this work around include the food, and that was that little infographic that I showed at the beginning. Cheers.
Can I add in just on top of that, just in terms of in Brighton, slightly processy thing is that it was really important for the food partnership to slightly decouple the strategy which oversees the work in the city away from the food partnership to an expert panel, which is about trying to future-proof the work that's happening in the city. So I think that in terms of process, and now the city council also has a food policy officer that is looking at the Greater Brighton region. So it's about, you know, as both cities have kind of talked about, embedding in existing structures and existing work. That's something that was really important for the food partnership to do.
Thanks. Joe, I like that. Include the food. I want to use that in Sheffield, where we're trying to get food into a strategy. It's a good slogan. Joe, did you still got a question?
Yeah, I mean, communications and engaging people, and you know, obviously is key to all of this, and it's something that that we're grappling with in Middlesbrough as well. And I've, you know, taken what Bristol and Brighton are doing with relating to their kind of turning actions into gold and various things as a fantastic kind of approach. And I just kind of wanted to kind of, to see what the response to that actually, you know, to see what it was. Was it relatively easy? Did you get a whole host of people? Did you get a swathe of people kind of reporting various actions, or was it a bit hard going that needed continual prodding and poking? And just to kind of, you know, a reflection on how valuable that actually is.
Yeah, should we go Bristol and Brighton again? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just wondering who would like to talk about this, because it's quite complex, actually, recording actions. Katie, I think Katie led some of our work on food waste, and I'm just wondering whether you might like to just chip in here from the food waste perspective.
Yeah, I think Danny also put a bit in the chat as well about this, but I think it was definitely not an easy thing to sort of encourage people to do this, because obviously, as Joy was saying about, we tried to work in terms of offers. Especially for the general public, you couldn't really offer them anything in return for their pledging of actions. We did run some competitions and things like that. For organisations, we had the idea that if you sort of pledge an action in across each of the 6 themes, you could become, I think, was it a champion? Was that the word that we used? So you could become a champion organisation in the city, and I think that was quite appealing for a number of organisations, and especially then sort of led to a bit of competition between organisations in specific areas. So I think both the universities ended up becoming champions. I think Bristol's possibly spurred on UE a bit to get to that status. So yeah, but it was really useful seeing those actions in terms of reporting, and also just to sort of spur on momentum in terms of blog posts and things like that.
Thanks, Katie.
Do you want me to come in from Brighton?
Yes, please.
So yeah, I mean, just to agree, I mean, what's really tricky, isn't it, is food and our work touches absolutely everyone. So we're, you know, city of 285,000 people. It's really, we have to, and we're tiny, you know, like yourselves. It's really, you have to be really focused, don't you, about where you're reaching. And actually, in terms of where change is going to happen, actually those sort of senior decision makers and then those grassroots groups are, in a sense, our stakeholders. They're the people who are going to change things, working in their different ways. So in a sense, it was more of a comms campaign in terms of reaching the public. What we really wanted, though, is we were aware that in our city, lots of people had no idea that there was a food partnership. I don't know if it's the same in your areas, but actually an awful lot of just ordinary people do not know that there's a food partnership. And we wanted to use the award to change that. So some of it was about just general awareness that actually this stuff is going on. In terms of the response to it, we did get quite a good response. Again, the social media stuff was really important, because when you're small, that's a really good way to get a message out and build some momentum. So I think it was more organisations. So that was restaurants, you know, big organisations, small ones, community groups. It was more those sort of activists and organisations who are so much the key part of our partnership who did that. But we did get quite good response around the pledges as well. We did some stalls and things. People were really keen to talk about some of the issues and absolutely signed up. And we did a bit of an online thing as well, where people could sign up their pledges. What we didn't have is a way to then sort of really go back to those people, which is, you know, like Katie said, largely a capacity thing. We just can't follow up with lots and lots of individuals. We really want them to do stuff, but we can't really monitor how many of them did do changes as a result. Or even really how many are more aware of food issues. But I suppose the other bit of our work, which isn't so, you know, is about actually making sure that we're not just engaging with the people who will, you know, be articulate about engaging around food issues and stuff. And I suppose the kind of stuff that I haven't talked about so much going on behind, where we've, you know, really focused on ensuring that the voices of people who are experiencing food poverty or other type, who are, you know, disadvantaged or underserved in other ways, are part of the process of consulting, so that we understand what their view is and can articulate that as well. And I suppose that's quite an important part of you know, the actions that come out of this. But I don't think we've got a way to kind of, you know, that's a more of a kind of consultation thing. So we tend to do like a focus group with a particular group of people. And we did that very much as part of this process. So, you know, that's people that you don't normally get a view from, like people who are rough sleeping. You know, I think everyone's so worried about the housing thing, forget about the food. And that was really interesting, because actually they you know, had some quite strong views about food. You know, people without recourse to funds, migrants and asylum seekers. There was a focus group with them. So that was kind of more feeding into the actions that were in our food strategy than the stuff that is kind of, but it's still very much part of the gold bid, because one of the areas of the bid was around food poverty, and actually, you know, that really complicated picture about how you capture the views of what needs to happen from some of the people whose views would otherwise be missed is such an important part of that picture. So sorry, that was a bit rambling, but I think, you know, I think as I was saying, Joe, to be quite honest, I don't think we engaged as fully with every individual, simply because we had to target our resources, and actually organisational stakeholders are the ones we probably need to go back to. So we tried to make it quite light touch and about raising awareness, about letting people engage, but not kind of forcing it.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, and a gargantuan task engaging with a whole place. A lot to ask. Tom, we'll bring you in.
Well, I'm realizing we've hit time, I think, and I was going to ask a question, but actually I'm going to make a suggestion. So the two things I think Leon has said at the start of this, you know, how can we dig deeper? How can we help share the learning across the network? The two things that really came through to me in working with our gold award holders was, one, how important a really effective approach to comms and good food movement building is broadly, so awareness and engagement. I just think that, you know, we've done a few pilots on that. There's a few more coming. Vera's currently working on a toolkit. I think actually doing something to bring that to life a bit more so we can learn more from each other around how to really work to engage a wide group of audiences. That's a suggestion that maybe in future we do a session on that. We'll work out how we can get people's views on that. And then the other one is that there is a really clear sense in both Bristol and Brighton that if you want to really shift the dial around this agenda, ultimately you've got to have full commitment from the local authority. You know, they do hold a lot of levers. Joe, I know this is a big issue for you. You know, how do you embed it in policy and all the rest of it? And I don't think it's just an issue at gold, actually. I mean, I'm working with quite a lot of places who are on that journey to silver, and actually a lot of the obstacles are actually there because they haven't got the level of local authority officer and political engagement that they really need. So I think another thing maybe to look at, to develop over the next few months, whatever, is a session around that, really learning the lessons and the secrets of success around how do you get full commitment. And I think particularly on that latter one, hoping with a fair wind that the white paper comes out with something on this in January, it might be worth trying to do something on that before the white paper lands, because if the white paper says a food strategy in every local authority, we're going to be pushing at an open door. It's probably best that we have kind of the tools of the trade available to us before that white paper lands, so we can make the most of it. So there's a couple of suggestions on there about how we might build on this going forwards. But anyway, the other thing, great session, absolutely brilliant. I thought it was fantastic from all parties. Massive round of applause.
Yes, thank you. Chris, I think we've got a bit longer, is that right? If we need it? Yes.
We do have time to go a bit longer, yeah, if you want to.
Victoria, I think you've got your hand up.
Can I just follow up? I agree with what Tom's just said, but and there's something in the chat that Joy's just put in about Hannah and the map she showed up about how food, you know, demonstrates how food is integrated in so many different departments in a local authority. I think just that visual kind of representation it was just so helpful just seeing it there. So I think, you know, encouraging people to be able to do that would be really helpful. It's just such a quick shot of showing how you can integrate food across the local authority. I think was really helpful. So if there's any more information that Hannah could give, I think it would be super helpful.
Hannah, do you want to come back on that and then over to Emily?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking about putting this in my presentation. I thought the better of it, but if you feel like you're being a bit of a stuck record, then you're probably kind of doing something right. I certainly felt like that with just like the kind of constant pushing, mentioning, kind of, you know, shoehorning it in. Just, I guess, the more that you can make it, I think for a lot of teams and services and councils, it's not always immediately obvious where that food is relevant to them. So the more that you can make those links, help people to see, oh, actually it is relevant. So for example, we had through that service mapping exercise, organizational mapping exercise, I got in touch with our housing and landlord services, and I wouldn't have really thought initially that there would be like that much opportunity there, but when we actually started talking to them, like they were so inspired, and they just like really ran with it, and it generated like this momentum within their division and service area that then led to like loads of other positive outcomes around kind of funding and other projects that kind of integrating food within other housing stock. So just, I think it can take a lot of time to have kind of quite one-on-one conversations. But if you can do that so that you can really kind of have a tailored conversation with the services and teams to really explore how food is relevant to them, then it can be really, really meaningful. I've seen someone's asked about sharing that the diagram. Probably can't share the nitty-gritty detail of it, but happy to share kind of a bit more.
Can I add to that? That I think, I mean, that sort of similar thing happened very early on from the very first strategy in Brighton, 2006. We had an amazing sustainability officer that was able to do that same thing, go around to different departments and kind of help them see how the actions and targets in that strategy would help them to do their existing jobs and how they could integrate it. So as Hannah said, it is a lot of work, but having someone there that can do that sort of translation work was really, really important in the early days in Brighton too. So there is a common theme there in terms of translating to sort of local authority kind of language and sort of targets and work objectives.
Thanks, Victoria. Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, it's I've got to tell you, but it's the idea, isn't it, that food is everywhere but nowhere in the local authority. It goes right across the directorates, but who do you talk to about food? So really,
can I just come in, Leon, just to obviously it's really helpful because Victoria has just made me feel not quite as old. Thank you again for that, Tom, because was there at the beginning of Brighton and Hove Food Partnership. So, you know, it is something that needs doing. I just wanted to echo what people were saying about the importance of engaging with local authorities. And just to say, I think that's really shifted. Most local authorities have had to have some kind of food response going on during COVID, and also they're worrying about things like empty shelves and rising food prices. So it's actually a good time to engage. And if there is a future session, I was going to say we've got a food policy officer now within Brighton Hove City Council. She hasn't come to this. She wasn't, because this was more sort of looking back at the award, and she's relatively newly in post. But if there's a future session, you know, it'd be great to invite her along and get her perspective as a new person there. It's something we've wanted for a long time. But I also wanted to make the point that actually as a partnership, those links to local authority are important, but actually those bottom up things, as Joy was saying, are just as important. You know, you can't have one without the other. So I just to reiterate that actually we're a partnership. We couldn't do any of this stuff without being a partnership. You know, it's our partners that share the word. We might do a bit of facilitation. Sometimes we might, you know, help things to move along, but actually it's the partners that do it. It's the groups, and particularly our kind of community level groups that do a lot of this, and indeed our private sector, you know, restaurants, retailers, people doing that stuff. So just to, I wouldn't want to get too fixated on just the local authority, even though they're absolutely key.
Thanks, Emily. Jane, I think you've got your hand up. Sorry if I missed anyone. I'm on two screens here. There's so many of you.
Okay, thanks. I'd just like to add something we used to do in Bristol before COVID, which was we had what we called the Food Policy Council comms meeting, which was just an informal gathering in a cafe of members from the Food Policy Council, sometimes officers from the council, people from Bristol Food Network, somebody from Green Capital Partnership, other activists in the city. And it was just an informal, safe space to discuss problems and to try and build collaboration and move things forward. And I think it's sometimes those informal structures that are the key rather than the high level planning, and so just to not forget about one while you're dealing with the other.
Thanks, Jane. I'm just having a look. Have we got any more questions? I do understand that it can be, seeing that level of work over such a long period of time can be fairly overwhelming. And, you know, we as a programme are, you know, working on how we can best disseminate this learning. And this is, you know, this is the first stage in that. So we'll be continuing to do that. If there's very specific areas that you want to learn from these places about very topic areas, do let us know. And then, you know, maybe we can do something specific on that. Again, I would say definitely read the full applications. You know, everybody who applies for an award, bronze, silver or gold, agreed to make their applications public, and they're on our website. So please do that as well. If Chris, did you want to come in there?
Just to say, there's been a couple of suggestions from there's from Vivian saying, you know, the tool that Hannah's developed around mapping the food agenda across the council, could there be some sort of template that we develop based on Hannah's work there to share? I think that's something we'd really like to be able to do. So we'll discuss that with the team. I think it seems really important, particularly over the next few months, as Tom says, ahead of what might be helpful within the food strategy. And again, a session about getting senior leadership on board. I know there's a lot of experience within the network there. We could share some experience and skills around that. So yeah, thank you for those suggestions. We'll discuss it with the team.
And that very much fits with, we know as a team, we need to help you guys to better make the case to local authorities. And we're planning all sorts of support for that, because I'm not sure if we've done enough of that before, because it is very specific. Emily, did you want to come back on something?
I wanted to come back on what Jane said actually about the mix of formal and informal, because obviously I was slightly worried that it came across that all we'd done is we'd had a party, but obviously what we did was we had quite a big consultation programme, and that included going out to places, you know, other networks and things, because a lot of the people you most need to talk to aren't going to come to you. So we did do a lot of consultation, but actually those sort of spaces are really important. And what the party does is it's a press thing, isn't it? It was like a way to get it in the local paper, but it was also that kind of engagement thing, again, mainly amongst the decision makers, you know, public health, the leader of the council, health, you know, those people, to build that momentum by also making it fun. And I think one of the reasons why we do get really good engagement on the food agenda is that we do try and make it really positive. It's so miserable, isn't it, being in a local authority at the minute? I mean, just the cuts, the austerity, the fact that your colleagues leave and they don't get replaced and your job gets bigger. And, you know, it's actually really important not only to be going to people with solutions, as Jane and Victoria said, so you're the answer to their problem, you're not their problem. But also, I think that things like that launch event are quite important in just keeping that goodwill going. And we have quite a loose structure now in terms of governance. We have our expert panel, as Victoria mentioned, which only meets kind of every 3 months or 4 months. And it is quite unstructured, and it's a chance to get, I mean, it's online, unfortunately, at the minute. It's much more fun if you can give people food than go to a place. But it's a chance to kind of get people from different bits together. I pictured it being a little bit more, I hadn't pictured that it would be so unstructured, but actually just hearing from people what the current challenges are and what suggestions are has been really important, and having that quite loose conversation around that. So I think I just wanted to agree with Jane that there's a sort of mix, isn't there, between the public facing stuff and then there's the kind of more formal consultation, although we try and make ours as fun as possible because we want people to want to come. But then there's also a need for a bit of informal stuff going on as well.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, have a party. Tom, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, since we've got some extra time, I'm going to put people on the spot a little bit. Unfair question, I know, you don't have to answer it, but my question is going to be, what would you have done differently?
I will go to Bristol first because you've just been speaking over this. I'll give you time to think about that.
I can just come in with a quick one from the food waste side to give my colleagues a bit of time to have a think. I think from my perspective at the start, we tried to spread ourselves a bit too thin. I think there were so many opportunities of things that we could potentially link into or get involved with or support, or different areas that we could work in, that almost made it much harder to make sort of any significant progress. I would have preferred to, from the start, sort of have a bit of a narrower scope possibly, or not get distracted by sort of little things going on. So yeah, be clear on your focus, I would say.
Thanks, Katie. Danny, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, mine is on a similar vein. I'd imagine a lot of people's will be to not spread yourselves too thinly. I think certainly with the comms, I mentioned at the beginning of when I was speaking that the remit was sort of reach everyone, and that's just not possible. I mean, everyone is a lot of people, and I think if I were to tackle it again, I think we sort of touched on this, but maybe having a generic public campaign that does what it does, and you're not trying to scrabble for numbers. You're just trying to get some general recognition, and then having much more targeted audiences, much smaller audiences with a very specific remit of what you're trying to communicate with them, what you're asking back from them, and just accepting that you're not going to get the level of engagement that you ideally would want from everyone in the city, but looking at really strong engagement from a few small groups would probably be the way to go.
Thanks.
Do you want me to come in now?
Yeah.
From Brighton, I think I'd echo what Danny said. I think oh, I think somebody's got a party going on, which is a good thing. Oh, thank you. I think the comms thing's quite tricky, isn't it, if you're trying to reach everyone? So having a good comms plan was really important. We put a lot of thought into how we were going to engage, and obviously we had our kind of key groups with the toolkits, and you know, and then the general stuff was largely just social media. And I totally agree with, you know, what you just said on that. I think I did mention some other lessons as well, and I had a couple of slides on that, which was, I think about what comes after, because actually it's a huge tool now, you know. I'd hate to say that I kind of called it a bit of a carrot and a stick in the presentation, in the slide, because actually it's great that it pops up, you know, sometimes without us even asking. Something's happening, oh, we're a Gold Food City and we're going to do this. But also, you know, sometimes people forget still. It's like you're still having the same conversation with, you know, like, hang on a sec, you know, where's food in this? We're a Gold Food City, and it's a really good, it's really important to kind of have that in the back of your head, I think. So that's sorry, that's not really something you do differently, but just to say, I think having a bit of a thought about how you want to target this really good tool going forward is really important. And I don't think we did that as well. And I think we missed some press stuff. I mean, I have to say the other big advice is don't do it in a pandemic, because obviously our organisation was just so stretched. We were running this massive food effort. It was a nightmare, really. So it's, and we also, you couldn't do things that we thought of, like having the trophy go on a tour around, because would it spread COVID? It was like we were going to have to put it in a taxi with sanitizer, and you know, it was just stuff you might have wanted to do was really tricky. So don't do it in a pandemic, but do have a think about how this trophy might look going around your place. How do you make it feel, and build on that ownership? You know, can it be shared out? Can you do stickers like us? And put a bit of capacity aside to do that, because obviously we only thought of the stickers afterwards, and I'm still struggling to get them sent out, you know, because we're tiny like yourselves. So I think that's my big tip, is have a think about what the afterwards.
Thank you, Emily. I noticed in the chat we had a quick question, I think from Beth. Sorry, Beth, I'm not sure where you're from, but it was a question about how does this all work in different geographies, two-tier authorities. I'm probably not going to answer that now, but also on the call is my colleague Alex Ward, who leads on our counties work. So if you're not already, maybe get in touch with her. And you know, we're working with quite a few two-tier councils and other geographies that might help you answer that question. Have we got any more questions? Okay, I think that's a good point to round off. Thanks everyone, it's been absolutely fantastic. We will be, this won't be the last bit of learning of this kind. There's so much to learn from Bristol and Brighton and other silver and gold places as they get awarded. So thank you all for coming. The recording will be up on our website very soon, and I hope you all have a good rest of the day.
Thanks everyone, bye.
See you later.
Thank you very much.